Tears of the Kingdom is almost 2 years old, somehow, meaning that somewhere in Japan, Nintendo developers are likely deep into development of the next era of 3D Zelda. Zelda's in an interesting position at the moment. In many ways, Tears of the Kingdom represents the ultimate version of the open-air formula introduced by Breath of the Wild, giving players an unbelievably gigantic world to explore, a set of incredibly powerful tools to explore it with, and, most importantly, the freedom to explore it however they want. Yet, I'd go as far as to say that there isn't a single Zelda game more divisive than Tears of the Kingdom. Taking this open-air format to its extreme did bring the series, quite literally, to new heights, but also exposed many of the flaws of this design philosophy, leading to the game being perhaps the most debated title in the series' history. In interviews, series director Eiji Aonuma has confirmed that the open-air format is here to stay, that while previous 3D Zelda games were cast in the same mold as Ocarina of Time, the series' future will follow in the footsteps of Breath of the Wild. Of course, last year saw the release of Grezzo's fantastic, yet somewhat underappreciated Echoes of Wisdom, which boasted a blend of new and old styles for the series, creative mechanics and huge amounts of freedom, but with a proper story structure and intricate dungeons. Echoes of Wisdom might hint at where the Zelda series is going, but as of right now, all we can do is speculate and hope. So let's do that. Today, I'll cover 5 changes to the open-air format I want to see in the next 3D Zelda title. Breath of the Wild was designed to give the player unparalleled freedom. Famously, it broke the conventions of Zelda that had been established ever since A Link to the Past, and returned to the series' roots, with a design ethos similar to that of the very first Zelda game. Here's a gigantic world full of secrets. Go and explore it. The game gives Link a set of abilities designed to traverse this world easily. He can climb almost any surface and sail through the air on his paraglider. Tears of the Kingdom then took this sense of freedom and turned it up to 11. Hyrule has been expanded into the skies above and depths below, but so has Link's skill set. He can now use Ascend to rise through ceilings and emerge on the other side, and even build Zonai machines that let him fly. Traversing Hyrule is so much easier in Tears of the Kingdom than it was even in Breath of the Wild. But what if the next open-air Zelda took the opposite approach? Instead of making traversal easier, what if the world became more difficult to navigate? Although Tears of the Kingdom's world is far bigger than Breath of the Wild's, it feels smaller because of the ease and speed at which you can traverse it. Compare flying across vast swathes of land on a Zonai machine to exploring Breath of the Wild's tutorial area, the Great Plateau, a tiny section of the game world, yet one that feels incredibly large and daunting because of how limited Link is at this stage. During the tutorial, Link not only has very little stamina, meaning he can't scale large cliffs easily, but most importantly, he hasn't unlocked the paraglider yet. Fall damage is an actual danger here, so working out how to get down from a high place is often just as challenging as working out how to get up there in the first place. The limitations imposed on Link during the Great Plateau, and to a somewhat lesser extent the Great Sky Island, forces the player to use mechanics that they otherwise wouldn't need to. For example, this chasm would normally not challenge Link whatsoever. He can jump and glide, and even if he doesn't quite reach the other side, he'll be able to climb up. But during the tutorial, this option isn't available, forcing him to get creative. By cutting down a nearby tree, he can form a makeshift bridge, thereby using the environment itself to solve a problem. Tears of the Kingdom's hoverbike being a one-size-fits-all solution to any traversal problems the game throws at you is a criticism that everyone will have heard before. But it is symptomatic of the core issue here. Giving the player such powerful tools to explore this world means that it's so easy to avoid exploring it, to miss out on so many little secrets and gameplay moments offered in this vast space. So while we know for certain that Tears of the Kingdom's successor will also be open air, I'd love to see a more restricted Link exploring this open world. Perhaps a Link without the paraglider, or without the ability to climb as easily, and certainly without the ability to build his own vehicles. This would force the player to really interact with the world itself, rather than glide or fly over it to reach the next point of interest, to truly feel grounded in a world that we can expect to be even more intricately designed, even more immersive than the Hyrule we've spent so long exploring. Speaking of Hyrule, it's got to go. But before we discuss that, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, Raycon Earbuds. Raycon sent me a pair of their everyday earbuds back in October of last year, and they're still my go-to lightweight choice for when I'm walking the dog, doing chores around the house, basically anything that isn't just sitting at my desk. They're built with an ergonomic design to fit almost any ear, and their active noise cancellation drowns out everything else, so you can make the most of the high-quality sound. Plus, they start at around half the price of other premium audio brands, and Raycon offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. You can grab your own pair at 20% off at buyraycon.com/ZelticYT. You'll not only be getting a great, inexpensive pair of earbuds, but you'll be supporting the channel too. Let's get back to the video. So Hyrule needs to go. Don't get me wrong, I love Hyrule. It's as integral to Zelda's DNA as the Triforce, the Master Sword, or Link himself. And the Hyrule explored in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the greatest iteration of this fabled kingdom seen yet. So much bigger, so much more detailed, and so much more mysterious than any version that has come before. A world so masterfully crafted that it served as the backbone for not one, but two gigantic Zelda games. But it's precisely because of that it's time to leave. I just can't see myself getting excited to explore Hyrule once again in the next game, even if it is a new iteration of the kingdom set in a new era or with some new twist. Instead, I'd like to see something of a palate cleanser, a game set in a world that is completely different to anything we've seen before. The obvious example to call back to here is Majora's Mask's Termina. Ocarina of Time's sequel saw the hero of time leave Hyrule behind in search of Navi, and fall into a mysterious alternate dimension. Though Termina is populated by doppelgangers of the people he met during Ocarina of Time, the world itself is completely different. 4 new regions surrounding the intricately designed central hub of Clocktown. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are both built around giving the players a set of tools to freely explore the world, then setting them loose in it. This is why Tears of the Kingdom felt somewhat underwhelming to some people. Despite how vast and incredible its world is, the majority of it is a world we've already explored. The next mainline Zelda game has to recapture the same magic that players felt on the Great Plateau at the start of Breath of the Wild. That sense of being at the center of a truly unknown world. Setting the next game somewhere other than Hyrule would also allow the series some breathing room, and loosen the restrictions imposed by what came before. While Breath of the Wild still maintains connections to previous games in the series, firmly establishing this Hyrule as the same one we've explored in games like Ocarina of Time, just thousands of years in its future, Tears of the Kingdom feels much more reluctant to do so, deliberately obscuring its connections to previous games and how this kingdom connects to the Hyrule of old. A new world would set the Zelda team free of the expectations of the fanbase, allowing them to tell whatever story they wanted to. Again, looking back to Majora's Mask as an example, its story is absolutely one of the deepest and most memorable out of all Zelda games, yet relies on almost none of the series' tropes. No Hyrule, no Triforce, no Ganondorf, no Master Sword. The game proves that the essence of Zelda isn't just these signature elements, but a story about adventure and courage, themes which will undoubtedly be at the centre of whatever comes next for the series. An entirely new world would also allow the game to once again fully utilise one of Breath of the Wild's strongest elements: environmental storytelling. By being the first of two games set in this post-apocalyptic Hyrule, Breath of the Wild's main story is supplemented by the world itself. The ruins littered across the wilderness fill in the gaps of the story of the Great Calamity, inviting the player to ask questions about the history of this place, and helping it to feel more real than any other version of Hyrule in the series. Tears of the Kingdom didn't have this luxury in the same way, as the vast majority of its world is simply the same Hyrule again. A new world would not only give players a new frontier to explore, but new lore and new history to uncover, strengthening its world building and story. And while we're on the topic of the story, as we know that the next Zelda game will be in the open-air format, it's essential that the way the story is designed is reworked to better fit this structure. Breath of the Wild's had its issues. While its story and its world building was, overall, excellent, the way the player discovered it left something to be desired. Link's adventure happens 100 years after the main events, which are discovered through memory cutscenes scattered around the overworld, leaving the player feeling somewhat disconnected from it, like they're only getting to play the epilogue to a grander narrative. At the end of the tutorial, King Rome's spirit provides Link with the entire story of the Great Calamity. This is all the essential information the player needs to take on the game's final boss, and the entire story outside of this is just additional context. Tears of the Kingdom's story suffered even more. Once Zelda is transported to Hyrule's distant past, Link can discover her story in the same way as his in Breath of the Wild, by recovering her memories across the world. Not only does this have the same issue of making the player feel like an external part of the story, this game's Spirit of a Long-Dead King of Hyrule doesn't relay the whole story to Link at the end of the tutorial like King Rome did, attempting to frame Zelda's adventure in the past as a mystery. This really does not work, largely for two reasons. First, the player can uncover Zelda's memories in any order, often leading to them accidentally learning huge story developments long before they have the context for them to have the proper emotional weight. And second, the characters in the present don't change based on the information Link learns from these memories. Even once he's discovered the truth, that she travelled to the distant past, transformed into the Light Dragon, and has existed in Hyrule's skies ever since, the characters Link interacts with are still stuck trying to solve this mystery. Considering that the next game will continue in the same format as these two games, the story has to be adjusted for this structure. This could be achieved in a few different ways. The most obvious is to lose the memory format altogether. Both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are designed with the majority of their story developments in the past, with the final act left to Link in the present. Even though the next game will still be open air, I just can't see it following this exact same pattern. I really don't think we'd get 3 games back to back with their stories set in the past, discovered through memory cutscenes. Every other 3D Zelda game has an elaborate history which influences the events of the main story, but the fact remains that the main story occurs in the present, with Link as the main agent of change. This is, of course, easier to achieve in games which offer the player much less freedom. The more linear structure of these games allows the story to unfold at set intervals, usually after dungeons. In contrast, having the stories in the distant past in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom allows the world to remain static in the present, so that the player has the freedom to explore and conquer it in any order they choose. The logic is there. It does make sense why this seems to be the chosen story structure for open-air games, but this is a problem that the Zelda team absolutely needs to address, and, in my opinion, the next game needs to have a story that plays out in the present. Many other games, albeit games that are less open than the Switch Zeldas, achieve this, with evolving stories that the player can drop into and out of as they continue to explore their worlds. There are many ways this could be accomplished while still retaining the core tenet of absolute freedom, such as by having the overall story move forward after Link beats a dungeon, triggering the next phase of the narrative no matter which dungeon was completed, changing the stakes, altering character dialogue, and perhaps altering parts of the world itself. This would keep the concept of freedom of exploration at the heart of the game, but allow the player to feel like they're the ones driving the story. It would prevent them accidentally spoiling themselves on twists or emotional moments, and also allow for the game to get progressively more difficult as Link's adventure continues. Speaking of difficulty, combat in 3D Zelda has evolved a lot over the years. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask first introduced Z-targeting and engaging with enemies in a 3D space, and the series built upon this foundation in The Wind Waker, which introduced concepts like parrying and advanced techniques like the hurricane spin. Twilight Princess marked the final evolution of this style, adding a litany of hidden skills to Link's arsenal, like the Helm Splitter or Mortal Draw, to give the player a ton of options when fighting enemies. Skyward Sword's combat did have some depth, but stands as something of an outlier because of its motion controls. And then we arrive at Breath of the Wild, which introduced the series' current combat mechanics. Combat in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom can be extremely varied and engaging. Like many other elements of the game's design, the games want you to use the environment to your advantage, to roll boulders onto foes, blow up explosive barrels, or anger swarms of bees. However, the core combat mechanics are actually incredibly simple. Link has a set attack pattern for the game's few different weapon classes, plus a separate jump and sneak attack, the parry, allowing him to bounce back attacks and stun enemies, and the flurry rush, where he dodges an enemy attack last second to retaliate with his own. There's also bow combat, including the ability to slow time if Link draws an arrow mid-air, and a handful of other mechanics, such as boomerangs and Urbosa's Fury. These tools feel great at first, but like so many other elements of these games, quickly stale. This is most apparent when facing some of the game's purest combat challenges, like Lynels, enemies that can't be easily cheesed with other methods and must be faced head-on. Lynels have gigantic health pools, and so fighting them becomes very repetitive. Parry or flurry rush over and over and over again. Flurry rush is not just powerful, it's absolutely essential to most combat encounters, and while it feels very satisfying the first few times, it quickly becomes very boring, slowing down the pace of combat to a near standstill every few seconds. Tears of the Kingdom attempted to expand Link's moveset in a few ways, such as introducing Zonai technology. Link can build his own murder machines to take on enemies in almost any way the player imagines. But this is incredibly time and resource consuming, to the point where it almost never feels worth it, and further adds to the issue of slowing down the pace of combat. It just means more time spent in menus rather than actually engaging with enemies. And this same issue is apparent with another of this game's combat additions in Fuse, which, while incredibly creative and fun to experiment with, also requires completely freezing the flow of combat while you painstakingly scroll through a gigantic list of materials. This is an issue when combat encounters are one of the main incentives for exploring the world itself. Outside of shrines, Korok puzzles, and the occasional side quest or town, some of the most common things to encounter in Hyrule are encampments or caves filled with enemies. At the beginning of the game, this is great, a chance to test your skill against a group of minions, and to upgrade your weapon arsenal in return. But the further you progress through the game, the less rewarding it feels to actually engage with groups of enemies. The final problem with the combat system of these games that I'll address is the way Link heals. In classic 3D Zelda games, Link can recover health by collecting hearts, gathered from slain enemies, cut grass, smashed pots, etc., and also by consuming healing items stored in bottles, like potions, fairies, or milk. Link can only carry a small number of bottles, limiting the amount of hearts he can recover in a combat encounter. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's cooking system allow the player to stock up on what amounts to basically infinite heals. Hearty ingredients are relatively easy to gather and allow Link to rustle up meals that fully restore his health. He can carry a truly massive amount of meals too, so anytime he's low on health, it's only a matter of pausing, eating a hearty meal, or 1,000 apples, and unpausing to completely negate any mistakes the player made during combat. Not only does this add to the same issue as Flurry Rush, Fuse, and Zonai devices, in that pausing to heal brings the flow of combat to a complete halt and shatters any immersion the player has, it leads to a strange imbalance in the game, where combat is far more punishing at the very beginning, when the player hasn't had the chance to stock up on healing food yet, and becomes absolutely trivial once they've done so. This results in many of the game's best combat sequences being those in which Link's items are confiscated, such as Eventide Island, the Trial of the Sword, or the Proving Grounds shrines, forcing the player to once again think on their feet, rather than relying on their massive stocks of supplies. So for the next game in the series, I'd love to see a much more advanced combat system. Of course, this is Zelda, not Dark Souls, so I wouldn't expect anything particularly punishing or with too high a skill floor, but I do want to see a much higher skill ceiling. Methods of combat that are intuitive and easy to understand for beginners, but can reward skilled players with advanced techniques and strategies. Even doing something as simple as adding more weapon types beyond small, large, and spear could expand the game's combat exponentially, and have the added benefit of making discovering new weapons far more rewarding. If Flurry Rush returns, I'd want it to be far less powerful or far more difficult to perform, so that its use doesn't completely dominate every combat encounter. And finally, I'd want to see Link's ability to heal either reduced drastically, perhaps by limiting the number of healing items he can have, akin to the potions in older games, or even by completely disabling his ability to heal while the game is paused. Again, to call back to Dark Souls and Elden Ring, healing in these games requires forethought and timing. The player can consume healing flasks, but this takes time in which enemies can still hit you. I wouldn't be opposed even to seeing an infinite heal introduced to Zelda this way, some kind of magic potion, if it actually required skill to use. Overall, while 3D Zelda combat has never been particularly challenging, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom definitely feels somewhat behind the curve. While these games truly pushed the limits of the series when it came to the overworld and exploration, their combat systems feel like they didn't get as much attention as other aspects. And with the certainty of us getting another huge open world in the next game, I hope that it'll be just as much fun to fight enemies in it as it will surely be to explore. Zelda music is at the heart of the series' identity. Many pieces are so famous that they transcend the series itself. It isn't uncommon for people to know tracks like Zelda's Lullaby, The Lost Woods, or Dragon Roost Island, without ever having played a Zelda game. I absolutely love the soundtracks of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but outside of dungeons, towns, and cutscenes, the music is very understated. Now, this is, of course, a deliberate choice, and it's perfect for the themes of these games. Both are set in the same post-apocalyptic kingdom of Hyrule. Link adventures through the broken ruins of this ancient kingdom, and the music reflects this. Quiet, fragmented piano melodies, with the occasional shattered motif of a recognizable Zelda theme like the Temple of Time or Death Mountain. If the next game is set somewhere else, however, in a world that isn't post-apocalyptic, then I'd love to see this difference reflected in the music too. This doesn't mean I want to hear the same Hyrule Field theme blasting on loop for the countless hours we'll spend exploring, of course. Bombastic overworld themes were far more effective in the older titles, when comparatively less time was spent actually travelling across them. The decision to dial back the music in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom makes sense, letting the world itself score the soundtrack of Link's adventure. The wind, the rivers, the calls of birds. But there are many other games that manage to balance environmental ambience with beautiful overworld music. Skyrim being perhaps my favourite example, which scores your adventure throughout its vast world with themes that are memorable and often energetic, yet still blend perfectly into the background of your adventure without distracting you. I'd love to see the next Zelda steer more in this direction, including overworld themes that are more than just scattered piano notes, indicating an evolution from the post-apocalyptic wild era into whatever comes next. I'd also like to see the next game's approach to music represented in gameplay mechanics. It's easy to forget when only looking at the Switch games, but Link is a musician. In every 3D Zelda game before these two, his musical skills were not only part of the game's story, but core mechanics too. The Ocarina in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the Wind Waker in The Wind Waker, Wolf Howling in Twilight Princess, and the Goddess Harp in Skyward Sword. From warping across the map, to changing the direction of the wind, to time travel itself, Link's music has always been a core part of these games, and of his character, an explicit celebration of how important music is to these games. This way, the player doesn't just experience an adventure scored to beautiful music, they are the musician, connecting them with the soundtracks in a way that just isn't quite there in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It might seem trivial, but this really is something I'd love to see return to the series in the next game. Just so long as it's not based on this concept art of Link with an electric guitar. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like, or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Let me know in the comments what your hopes are for the next Zelda game. What would you like to see in the series' next step? Again, a huge thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Check them out at buyraycon.com/ZelticYT. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.